Visual and performance art dates all the way back to the classical period in ancient Greece, with tragic poets like Sophocles who wrote plays that were to be performed in front of an audience. Western art of all kinds largely died during the Dark Ages, along with logic and reason, unless of course you count witch burning as a performance art.
We have found a witch, may we burn her?
Art as a whole was picked up again during the Renaissance period, where you had famous figures like Michelangelo, Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and some other dudes who aren't as important because they're not Ninja Turtles. It has continued since then and encompasses all things from film to literature to paintings to music to sculpture to body art to poetry, you name it. Like most things, art has evolved over time, with styles ranging from the realistic portrayals of Da Vinci to the abstract expressionism of Jackson Pollock. Time has created a huge diversity of styles. Art styles often changed when societal thought changed. The events of World War I changed the way people thought. No longer were people finding war and nationalism glorious. They realized that they are not dying for their country, they are dying because of their country. This new, skeptical, pacifist way of thinking reflected on the art of the post-World War I time. The writers, called Lost Generation authors, wrote stories heavily ladled with social criticism and cynicism. Ernest Hemingway was one of the more prominent Lost Generation authors who wrote a book called The Sun Also Rises, which is about a man who goes to war and becomes impotent because of his serving in war. This is really critical of what people thought prior to World War I about war. War used to be something that would claim your manliness. It was very, testosterone building, but this depicts a tale where a man goes to war and loses his manhood by becoming impotent. He is unable to get an erection. That is his manhood. So war, instead of giving him his manhood, takes away his manhood.
Your chemistry together is fierce. It is fierce. Absolutely fierce. Totally. It's fierce.
Conveniently enough, art also changed over the period of 1945 to 1991 dramatically. A variety of new movements were born during this time, such as abstract expressionism, which paintings look something like Nicolas Cage would have done during a freakout. Another prominent movement of the time was pop art, which challenged the traditions of fine art by including images of pop culture. One main figure of this movement was Andy Warhol, who, other than pop art, also made some weird, cool, experimental films. Like this one called Empire, which is just a static shot of the Empire State Building for like an hour. Or this one called Blowjob, which is just a static shot of some dude who's getting assumed fellatio for like 20 minutes. Or one of his only films to have an actual cohesive storyline, if you can even call it that, Vinyl, which is actually the first adaptation of A Clockwork Orange, and it predates the Kubrick version by 7 years, actually. Though the Kubrick version is a much more accurate retelling of Anthony Burgess's novel, since the Andy Warhol 1965 Vinyl film is just about as loose as an adaptation could possibly be, and still call it an adaptation. And of course, my favorite Andy Warhol film, entitled Andy Warhol Eats a Hamburger, which details Andy Warhol eating a hamburger. And I guess you get what you get in the titles. He really has trouble getting that ketchup out. So that's how art has changed over the period of 1945 to 1991, but what role did it play in society? Well, the art movements of the time spawned some important counterculture groups, such as hippies. Hippies and beatniks, who are both, well, at least hippies are a direct response to the Vietnam War, and more specifically their dislike of it. Both hippies and beatniks both created art based on the things that they believed in, such as experimentation with drugs, free love and alternative sexualities, an interest in Eastern religion, a rejection to materialism and capitalism, and an explicit portrayals of the human condition. So prominent figures of beatnik culture and hippie culture would be bands like Bob Dylan and the Beatles, writers like Allen Ginsberg for his poem How, or William S. Burroughs for his novel Naked Run, and others. So that's how art changed during the period of 1945 to 1991. That was its effect on society, but how has art since changed since 1991? So we have to take a trip to the 24th century, or as people in the 20th century call it, the future! Art changed dramatically because of one key invention, the computer. Now, this invention not only caused Ferris Bueller to almost blow up the Earth,
Shall we play a game?
Oh.
but also caused a whole new genre of art. Digital art, which is basically any art that is made on a computer, using programs like Photoshop, or if you want to get real advanced, Microsoft Paint. The user-friendliness of these programs has given people the ability to make their own art, and get it out there, you know, publish it to places like the internet. And the internet has really proved to be a great place for artists to share their content to a wider audience. And some artwork has gotten mainstream popularity, like a webcomic called Homestuck, which has garnered a huge fan base, huge annoying fan base that I don't understand. Street art, and more specifically graffiti art, is another art form that is fairly new. It isn't uncommon for art to have a political agenda, but graffiti art is often the most direct and uncryptic way of showing your political agenda. Whether it be anarchism or pacifism or standing up to oppression and inciting revolution, or whatever. Postmodernism is another pretty important art movement in recent years, which at its core, what it is basically a skeptical response to established concepts. Pulp Fiction is one important example of postmodern film. It uses things like a non-linear storyline and various stylistic error mixing to demonstrate intertextuality and subjectivity of time. This creates a skeptical analysis of anything resembling meaning. Whether or not there was any authorial intent from Tarantino for Pulp Fiction to be a postmodern masterpiece is pointless, because anyone who's analyzed Catcher in the Rye knows that authorial intent really isn't all that important. Or maybe postmodernism is just an extended tantrum about how we don't have flying cars yet.